there is like so much going on in the world that's like not so great. So like to be able to focus on this fun little piece of community folklore, it feels like a breath of fresh air.
Patrick Scalisi and Valerie Ruby-Omen are the creators of the 2023 book Connecticut Cryptids, a field guide to the weird and wonderful creatures of the Nutmeg State. Pat, the author, is an award-winning journalist and writer of young adult science fiction, and Val, the illustrator, is a professional artist with a certificate in cryptid illustrative works from Constitution State College. How great is that? Together, they have documented Connecticut's most important cryptids. You know, those elusive folkloric creatures that have not been proven to actually exist, but that pop up in different forms throughout time and all over the world. For this episode, Pat and Val tell me the wild story of the Glawackus, a 1966 hoax that got totally out of hand. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am so excited to welcome Pat and Val to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I know you've got a great story for me and probably some little stories sprinkled in there as well that I know our audience will love. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
So I'd love to just hear, you've obviously written this book about Connecticut cryptids, and we haven't really done a lot of cryptid content on our show, which is kind of surprising. Recently, we did have someone on who wrote a book about Bigfoot, but that's really the most cryptid we've got lately. So let's get into your relationship first with cryptids and what made you want to write this kind of field guide to your state of all these different creatures.
Sure. And I guess we're glad to bring more cryptid content to American Hysteria. But for me, I have always had an interest in local history, especially offbeat tales or like little bits of trivia from the place I live and come from and things that are associated with where I live. And so I knew some of the bigger pieces of cryptid folklore from Connecticut. One of the bigger stories from the state is the Black Dog of the Hanging Hills in a town, Meriden. And I kind of got to wondering what other stories were out there. And so I started doing research. I began contacting local historical societies to see if they had any creature folklore from their communities that they wanted to share. And as I started getting responses, it was like, wow, there's enough content here to potentially fill a book. I didn't know what I was going to do with the information when I got it. I had a vague idea that maybe I would start a blog or a website, but there was certainly a great outpouring of stories that came my way. And I thought maybe somebody had to have done this already. And it didn't look like anyone had. There was a book that I found about Vermont monsters, but nothing specific to Connecticut that collected all of the creature stories in one place. And so I thought, okay, well, this will be my next project. And at that point, I asked Val to come on board to see if she wanted to illustrate it with me.
It was a very easy yes for me because I'm very, very into cryptids, the paranormal, oddities, any kind of weird, creepy things you could think of. I just feel like there's so much room for imagination in these genres. So as an artist, it was definitely a very inspiring project and kind of a dream project too.
The illustrations are so fun. I got to see some of them. So are we coming in, you two, as people who have any belief in any of these creatures, or are we coming in more as like folklorists who are collecting stories?
I think we both approached the book from a place of skepticism.
Mm-hmm.
I was more interested in the storytelling aspect of these tales and these creatures and how they're related to the communities that they come from. So definitely came in from that perspective, and I'll let Val answer as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely a skeptic as much as I would love to see Bigfoot, and I'm I'm open to seeing Bigfoot. I unfortunately never have, and I don't really have any solid evidence of Bigfoot living here in Connecticut, so I have to approach it with a healthy amount of skepticism.
But you'd say hey to him if you saw him, and you might believe. All right.
Absolutely. I would get a selfie for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, it sounds like we approach what we do with a similar mindset. I definitely am not a cryptid believer. I have a much stronger potential belief in ghosts, but I like the flexible skeptic angle of everything. And I also enjoy compiling stories. And that's what's interesting to me. And on our show, I think urban legends are really my deepest heart's joy, and cryptids and urban legends overlap. And I guess a cryptid would probably be a subgenre of an urban legend, suburban legend, rural legend, whatever you want to say.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a lot of crossover.
Oh, yeah. So maybe we could get into this story that you brought to me that was the inspiration for having both of you on. I don't know it. I only got the teaser from you, but it was enough. And I want to go on this journey. So are you ready?
I think we're ready.
Oh, yeah.
Hell yeah. All right. Take it away.
So to give you a little bit of background, in Connecticut in the 1930s, specifically in 1939, there were these happenings around the town of Glastonbury. And there were sightings of some kind of animal, and some people's pets got injured, and in some cases, I believe, went missing. Same with some folks' livestock. There were livestock that were harmed, livestock that were killed. And it fed into this kind of building media interest that resulted in the birth of this story of this creature called the Glawackus.
Will you tell us how you spell that?
Yes, absolutely. It is Glawackus.
Okay, great. I just wanted a visual.
And the person who came up with the name was one of the editors of Hartford Courant, which is one of the papers here in Connecticut. And he said he combined the words Glastonbury, which was the creature's habitat, the word wacky, which was what was happening to the town when all of this was going on. Everyone was going wacky. And he added the suffix US at the end to give it a scientific Latin-y kind of feel.
Okay.
And so the Glawackus was born.
Glawackus. Okay.
And the Glawackus was interesting. Like I said, it grew into this kind of media frenzy. There were repeated sightings of it over months. And eventually things died down as the year went on. Supposedly somebody caught the Glawackus. A hunter said he caught it and, buried it in the woods, never to be seen again. And there's other people who have done some research that believe that the whole thing was a hoax. But you need a little bit of an understanding of the Glawackus story, the main story that we are going to share with you today.
Okay.
So now fast forward about 30 years to 1966. And obviously there's a lot going on in America in the 1960s. There's Vietnam War protests, the civil rights movement is happening. There's tensions because of the Cold War, Cuba, things like that. And so much like today, I feel like we are having a kind of steady stream of bad news
Sure.
in the year 1966. And so this gentleman in the town of Essex, Connecticut, kind of gets it in his head that he wants to do something to bring a bit of levity to his community. But unfortunately, things didn't quite go the way that he expected.
Okay.
And so on September 15th, 1966, a local newspaper called The New Era publishes this article titled Horsemen Encounter Creature Believed to be Glawackus.
Okay.
And the spelling of this creature is Glowackus.
Okay.
And it was this gentleman, Fred Knapp, who wrote the article for the New Era newspaper. He was trying to build off of the legend of the Glawackus, but he misspelled it. And as a result, he ended up kind of creating his own sort of legend and own sort of cryptid creature.
I guess that's why you check your work twice before putting it out.
Exactly. It's maybe the New Era's editor was on vacation that week.
They didn't have spell check back then. So,
that's true.
The losing battle from the start.
And it wouldn't be in the dictionary anyway. So
you would have had to have added Glawackus to the. I think my phone has learned it.
Yeah. My
probably
phone
because I've said it so many times.
Yeah, that's sweet.
But on September 15th, Fred Knapp publishes this article about this encounter that he supposedly had. And it wasn't just him. It was him and 6 others. And they were taking part in this event called the Essex Autumn Ride, which was a kind of horseback trail ride through town and through a kind of wooded trail area called the Great Pequot Swamp. And so they said they were on their trail ride when all of a sudden they saw this creature kind of plant itself in the middle of the trail, and that the creature began making very strange noises. At first they thought it was a bear, but then they came to realize that it was something quite different. And so one of the member of their party, a gentleman by the name of Roy Kelly, who is a local optometrist, he decides to charge the creature to try to scare it away back into the woods. And the rest of the group tries to move on, while another one of the party, a man named Edmund O'Brien, stays behind to make sure that their kind of trail of retreat is protected, that nothing's going to get them from the back.
Okay.
But according to the article, the creature then appears a second time and began to kind of make this strange noise again. And luckily, Edmund O'Brien had his camera with him, and he tries to use the camera and the camera flash to scare the creature away once and for all.
Mm-hmm. As you do.
Yeah, they're very lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Because, everyone knows that cryptids are immune to all kinds of photography.
Yeah.
Things tend to go blurry.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, things tend to go blurry. But wouldn't you know it, Edmund O'Brien not only was able to scare the creature away with the flash of his camera, but he got a picture of it that was then published along with the article in the New Era newspaper.
Now, can I see a picture of this? Is there a way?
Yeah. I can share my screen. Hold on one moment.
Let me see it. I gotta know. Maybe I'll do a little description for our listeners of what I see here. Ooh,
it's creepy.
Really creepy.
Right?
Okay. Yes. Oh, okay. All right. Let me see if I can try to describe this thing. It really looks like a kind of human-like face, kind of caked in mud or something like that. And it's just got a very neutral look on its face, hiding amongst the trees. And it's definitely, I think that it's washed out. So it's kind of just only imprints of what seems like facial features. Very creepy. Do you think I did an okay job describing this?
I think you did an excellent job.
Yeah, that was really good. It definitely does look like its face is caked in mud.
Yeah, no, it's weird. It's definitely, I was expecting more of a Sasquatch or more just something. It just looks like no cryptid I've ever seen, and I really respect that.
Yeah, they did a good job. They screwed up on the Glawackus thing.
Yeah,
they did a good job with their own sort of self-invention.
For sure.
Yeah. This is more important than the spelling, so it's okay.
Yes. And I also love that the newspaper ran this kind of close-up. It looks like probably on the front page, with just the what is it and the jump, see page 6.
Yeah, it's very Weekly World News, kind of.
Yeah, and then you get the kind of fuller photograph with the article itself.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. Did it describe like its size? Like, are we talking like a tall as a person, little tiny guy? What is it?
Yeah, so in the article, they interview the first selectman of Essex. And if your listeners are not familiar with that term, because I think that may be a kind of Northeast or even Connecticut exclusive term, a first selectman is kind of like the mayor of a town.
Got it.
And it's just a kind of local government we have here.
Got it.
So in the article, they interview the first selectman of Essex, and he has the fantastic name Escott McWhinney. And he claimed that the creature was the Glawackus, but again, they misspelled it. And they described it as a half human, half animal creature. And when viewed at night, it would appear to glow strangely. It said that it had the size of a normal male person, and it travels on all fours, but can also walk upright.
Ooh.
Piggish and human-like face, feet or paws taloned, tailless, dense brown tan fur with 4 ears.
4 ears?
Yeah, I like how they latched onto that particular characteristic.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. It's creative.
Yeah.
I'm also seeing here, I'm looking at your article on the shared screen, and I just saw a description of its sound. Oh, wait, here it is. If you don't mind, may I?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right. O'Brien says squeals turned to terrifying whuffings. I don't know what a whuffing is. And then fierce, threatening roars. What do we think whuffings? I'm like thinking it's like...
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly what I would think bluffing is.
Yeah. I feel like it's the sound that one of the cats makes when they're like really frustrated. I don't know.
That's what my cat does that. And I don't hear many cats do that. Like my cat kind of snorts when she's mad. It's kind of it's very cute. So I guess I'll just picture that, but like very big and scary.
Yeah. One of my cats does that as well.
It's rare.
So we're in good cat company.
Yes, we are. We are. Okay. More after this. And now back to the show.
So the New Era publishes this article. They give this description of the creature along with the picture. As the newspaper begins to go out into the world, I'm not really clear if this was a paper that was kind of delivered to everyone in the community, like a community paper, if it was something that people went out and purchased. So I'm not really clear on what method of distribution it had. But as the kind of paper goes out into the world over the next coming days, people see the article, and I don't know if you noticed in looking at the article, but there's really nothing that suggests that it is satire or humor or anything like that. We only have the clipping to look at, but there's nothing that suggests that it's anything but serious news. And the sense that I get is that this newspaper was not, like you said, not a weekly world news, that it was a community newspaper of some kind.
Yeah, it looks normal. It looks like a normal paper to me. It's not.
Exactly.
It's not silly or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's nothing to indicate that it's satire or humor or anything other than real news. It is presented as a factual article. And so as the newspaper goes out into the world, police departments in the area start getting phone calls from local residents asking about this creature or monster that is supposedly lurking in their community. And supposedly people began to be afraid of leaving their homes for fear that they may also run into the Glawackus creature.
Okay.
In the meantime, the New Era newspaper began fielding phone calls as well. They supposedly got upwards of 200 phone calls from readers asking if the article was true and asking for more clarification about, again, this creature that was supposedly lurking very close to their homes.
Okay. So some people were believing this enough to call and ask, it sounds like. I mean, 200 people is no small amount of people who actually needed to know, is this real?
Yeah, exactly. So between the newspaper and the police, there was more than 250 phone calls.
Wow.
To try to find out what is going on, what is happening with this Glawackus thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of this hullabaloo starts to happen. And as a result, the Connecticut State Police and the nearby Old Saybrook Police Department began to send officers down to Essex to kind of reassure the public that they are safe and to interview Mr. Fred Knapp to hear his side of the story and to try to determine what the heck is going on.
And just to clarify really quick, Fred Knapp is not the writer of the article, but is the experiencer.
He is both the writer of the article and one of the experiencers.
Okay,
he is one of the people who was on the trail ride.
Okay.
So the police are come down to check things out and to try to figure out what is going on. And a few days later, the New Era newspaper is forced to publish a full retraction explaining that it was a joke, that there is no creature called the Glawackus that is lurking in the woods, hanging around Essex, waiting to prey upon people. And of course, the police are not very happy with Fred Knapp and the first selectman of Essex. I don't know if they raid Knapp's home or if they ask to look around and he, simply lets them in. I don't want to, go into hyperbole and say that there was a raid on his house, but they did search his house and they found a monster mask that was used to compose the picture. I have it up on my screen.
I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, it's one of the police officers, Trooper Patrick Hedge, displays Glawackus.
He's holding the mask and looking at it with such disdain and annoyance. It's such a good picture. This is should be a
what
poster.
A waste of my time.
And it's kind of like, Trooper Patrick Hodge, what are you really doing that you're being taken away from right now? This seems like this would be the best day of my life if I got hoaxed like this. But yeah, I'm looking at this mask that it was built off of, and it almost looks like creature from the Black Lagoon or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Or do we know what the original mask was?
I think that's as good a guess as any.
Yeah. It does kind of have that characteristic to it, but it also kind of looks like a monkey. I don't know. It's very unsettling.
It is unsettling, especially in the quality of photograph we have in this newspaper. Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. So he's been raided. I'm going with hyperbole. He's been raided by the cops. Okay.
And he would have gone away with it too if it weren't for those darn kids.
That's perfect.
That is a Scooby-Doo villain right there.
Yeah. This is a Scooby-Doo story, actually. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Wonderful. It's wonderful. I love this.
So the police are actually thinking about pressing charges of, I think, breach of peace on a number of people who were involved in the prank. And Fred Knapp and Scott McWhinney, they claim that they're shocked that people took what they were saying seriously. So kind of a typical response. I was just kidding.
Yeah. The backpedaling and the gaslighting.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're gaslighting the whole town.
Yes. I don't think any of them were actually charged, but this article comes from the New Haven Register, which is another of the big state papers. And it sounded like the police were seriously considering some kind of breach of peace charge. So the New Era newspaper, of course, runs its retraction, and they do get some mileage out of this over the next coming months. But what's notable is that all of the articles that are published going forward have a kind of subhead that says, like, not to be taken seriously or strictly for laughs, to just make it very clear that there is no Glawackus.
It says in this article, the story upset the entire community to a considerable degree. Lieutenant Hart said mothers were keeping their children indoors as a result of the story. Some adult women were also afraid for their own personal safety following the publication of the reported sighting of a furry creature with horned talons, pig-like face with 4 ears and half human, half animal body, which is just such a funny thing for the police to be saying to a newspaper.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can imagine why he was not too happy to be photographed with that thing. Like, this is such a joke.
Well, he got so much shit from the boys down at the station for that, I'm sure.
But what I thought was also interesting in one of the New Era articles is they do talk about the sort of War of the Worlds comparison with Orson Welles and his broadcast, which I know has also kind of been slightly debunked, I believe, in passing years, that it kind of wasn't as big of a deal as it was made out to be. But yeah, I thought that was amusing that we had our own kind of homegrown situation where that happened with this creature. And like I said, all of the articles, they were very careful after that all of the articles were clearly marked as satire after that.
So what is this? This article you just put up, long lost love of Glawackus found its Arabella buffalo. What does that mean?
So Fred Knapp, I think, also invented this other character. He kind of continued to go all in on this even after he was sort of unmasked as the mastermind behind it. And he
walked so Weekly World News could run.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's what I'm feeling.
So he kind of continued writing these satire articles about it, which also sort of poked fun at the community for falling for his prank. And I believe he invented this character, Arabella Buffalo. He also claimed in the first article that the Glawackus was listed in this fictional book called Mushheim's Memorabilia of Monsters, which was a fictional encyclopedia of monster entries. So he had a very vivid imagination for sort of creating these characters that sort of populated the background of the Glawackus story.
So did Fred Knapp ever make the connection publicly in his articles to the situation from the 1930s?
Well, so that's what they said they were trying to base their prank on. They knew the story of the Glawackus, and they said that after 30 years of being absent, it had reappeared in Essex from the town of Glastonbury. But that's kind of where the accuracy, I guess, is the word I would use, even though it's sort of funny to use that word when we're talking about these sort of stories. But that's where the accuracy of his comparison ends, because he got all the other facts about the Glawackus wrong. The Glawackus is always described as an animal, kind of a cross between a dog and a cat.
And this is, the Glawackus, the 1930s.
The Glawackus is the 1930s
Okay.
one.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, it's confusing.
No, it's okay. So that one, the original one, was much smaller, more dog cat like.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So Fred Knapp pretty much got all of the facts wrong, and in doing so, created his own bit of folklore, whether intentionally or not.
So in the 1930s, you had said in the beginning when you gave the background that this creature was seen like a few times and then was said to have been killed and buried, right?
Correct.
So is there any more about what happened in that situation?
We're not really sure. And that's one of the fascinating things that we discovered while we were researching the book. As I mentioned, both of us approached the stories from a place of skepticism, but there are things that we found that don't have easy explanations or clear-cut answers. And the Glawackus in the 1930s is one of them. We know from the reports of the time that something was happening, that something was sort of claiming the lives of pets and livestock. That's part of the historic record. The folklore that sprang up around it, we sort of know where that comes from. But as the months went on in 1939, the killing of animals stopped. And obviously the newspapers would have moved on at that point. You know, if it bleeds, it leads. And if it doesn't, then, you know, we're going to move on to the next thing. So we know that the killings of animals stopped, but we never really got a clear answer of what the actual Glawackus, what really was. If it was, you know, some people have suggested it was a wild dog or maybe some kind of rabid animal. Some people have suggested that it was a mountain lion or some other kind of big cat. Notably, the prior fall, there was a large hurricane in New England, I believe, and it damaged a zoo.
Whoa.
And so people suggested that it could have been a zoo animal that had escaped. So there were all these kind of theories floated about what it actually could have been, but there's not a real clear-cut answer.
Wow. I mean, it kind of has a lot in common with the cattle mutilation myths and things like that. Like, it feels like someone could easily make the jump to aliens if they wanted to.
Yeah. Now, there's another interesting kind of side story about the Glawackus, and it has to do with a gentleman from Massachusetts. And so while this whole Glawackus thing was happening in Connecticut, there was a man in Massachusetts, and his name was Roger Johnson. And Roger Johnson of Springfield, Massachusetts, is kind of credited with being the person who populated the sport of caving or spelunking.
Oh, okay.
He had a hobby where he liked to explore the caves in and around the Berkshires where he lived. And it just so happened that one of the people that he was working with at the time, a journalist named Clay Perry, was just about to release a book about caving. It was going to be a guidebook called Underground New England so that other people could take up this hobby. And it kind of just so happened that the Glawackus thing was happening in Connecticut when the book was about to come out. So Roger Johnson, who we're told was a great lover of folklore, hears about this Glawackus story in the 1930s, in 1939, and he says to himself, well, this is a marketing opportunity that we cannot ignore. So he decides all throughout the month of April 1939 that he is going to stage Glawackus hunts in caves in Connecticut, New York, and Massachusetts to help promote the sport that he's trying to popularize and to promote Perry's new book.
I'm telling you, the speed at which I would have run to that event to go into that cave and look for the Glawackus is lightning fast.
Yeah, and it apparently worked fantastically well for him. They would hire women to act as quote unquote bait for the creature.
Stop.
And at the end of the month, he staged this kind of elaborate death scene for the Glawackus, in which he went into a cave in Salisbury, Connecticut. The name of the cave is the Bashful Lady Cave. And he once and for all, quote unquote, caught and killed the creature. And he had it stuffed and kind of staged above a den of stones. And it was apparently made partially from a women's hand muff. And I have a picture of that as well that I could bring up and show you. I just have to find it.
Oh, please show me.
All right. So here is the one that he caught.
Okay, so what I'm seeing here, folks, is what looks like kind of like a furry pig, maybe. It's not that large. It's like a medium-sized dog size. And yeah, it is not terribly threatening.
Yeah, this one's definitely way cuter than the Glawackus, though.
Oh yeah, much cuter. So when you say that he staged a death scene, did that mean that people were watching the death scene, or he just told the story of the death and then presented the stuffed version of the creature?
I'm not clear on that. That's a great question. I don't know if sort of spectators came out to these caving events, or if it was just the people who sort of signed up to go on the caving expedition of the day, the people who were going to go down into the cave that day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, supposedly, it was a sort of prearranged event that he decided to have on April 23rd, 1939.
And what am I looking at here? Because we see the Glawackus, and then it is standing on like slabs of rock that kind of form a little hole that Roger Johnson is like halfway inside, and you can only see his like kneeling legs. So what's going on there?
So according to this article, which appeared in the Republican newspaper from Springfield, Massachusetts, according to the writer of this article, the creature and this kind of staged display that you see on screen was displayed at the New York World's Fair.
That's so cool.
And then it promptly went to the Johnson family's home, where it supposedly was in the basement for several decades.
Wow. I wonder what the placard said at the World's Fair. Like
I could only imagine.
What was the angle in which it was displayed,
It was also displayed apparently at the 1979, I'm going to try to pronounce this, National Speleological Society Convention.
Well, we'll say the National Spelunkers.
It sounds
right?
great. Yeah.
That's what that word must be. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And a number of spelunking clubs have the Glawackus as their mascot. So what again is so interesting to me is that this story of this mythical creature from Connecticut ended up having this outsized impact on this sport that happened to be emerging at the same time.
Wow. And so that's still true. Like in the modern day, we might have a listener that is familiar with this as part of their spelunking club.
I from what I understand, yes.
Wow. That's so great. More after this. And now back to the show.
So the Glawackus, has kind of entered the public consciousness in Connecticut. It's one of the more famous Connecticut cryptid stories that continues to live on today. We participated in a Glawackus Day celebration earlier this year at a bookstore in Glastonbury.
Yes, that was very fun. I hope they do that again, because it's just very cool to see the community coming together around this creature and just celebrating it. I think it does a lot for a community. It brings people together. It's this shared piece of folklore that like you can kind of bond over. Like everybody we talked to in Glastonbury at Glawackus Day was like very excited about the Glawackus.
Yeah.
And I just think that's really great to see, like there is like so much going on in the world that's like not so great. So like to be able to focus on this fun little piece of like community folklore, it feels like a breath of fresh air.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when there are so many hoaxes that are so damaging out there that are like ruining our entire country, it's really like special when there's just a low stakes hoax that does nothing else than like give intrigue and maybe like a momentary, like, we've got to keep our children inside. But I mean, I'm sure that was like five people in the whole town. But it's just, I love hoaxes. They fill me with such joy when they are like this, because like you said, I think it does bring a community together in many ways. And I think that's why we see all over the country so many places, as you know, with their individualized cryptids. And it's almost like they become mascots for the towns they're from. And it's so wonderful.
Yes, the Glawackus definitely is like a Glastonbury mascot. The Historical Society sells T-shirts that has the Glawackus on them. Pat and I both have one, obviously.
Oh, yes. It was a must purchase.
But yeah, it definitely is like a mascot, which is very, very endearing to me.
And the Hartford Athletic, which is our pro soccer team, their mascot is also partially based on the Glawackus.
Wow. Ugh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Historical Society put on a great display at Glawackus Day, too. They had a number of original clippings from the newspapers, and they also had these wooden Glawackus prints. Imagine a block of wood with additional pieces cut out on the bottom to make paw prints and a leather strap that you would strap onto your shoes so that you could walk through the snow making Glawackus prints.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So that's where the Glawackus sits today. I'm not aware of anyone kind of continuing the story of the Glawackus in Essex. They're not having a celebration for that one, I don't think.
No.
But yeah, like you were saying before, the community celebrations are so interesting. Val has gone to one the past 2 years in Pennsylvania having to do with a creature called the squonk.
Yeah, Squonkapalooza in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. It's a great time. I'm not getting paid by anybody to say that. I just truly enjoy this festival. But their creature, the squonk, is this little gross, like hairless, like pig/pug looking creature that is supposedly so ugly that it just cries about how ugly it is and like leaves a trail of tears behind it.
No.
And the people of Pennsylvania, especially in Johnstown, have really come together around this little guy. Like they celebrate it. And it's just like this annual meeting of like kind of like weirdos who like cryptids and like to celebrate these kinds of things. And it's just so much fun. Like they have somebody who walks around in a squonk like mascot suit. It's a great time. I love things like this. Like I'd love to see more of it happen. Like, you know, I really want to see Glawackus Day like blow up and like, you know, put us on the map.
We need a national holiday. We need a day off of work, I think.
I support it.
So this squonk, I imagine that you illustrated.
Yeah, so this is an illustration of the squonk I did riding the black dog, which is like one of Connecticut's more popular cryptids. So I thought it would be cute to bring Connecticut and Pennsylvania together. So for some reason, I pictured the squonk as like a little cowboy. So that's how I depict it.
Cowboys are famously criers.
It feels very feasible to me that he would be roaming the woods, like riding a black dog in the night, just crying.
Oh yeah, who's not doing that?
I know, right?
On a Sunday morning. Yeah.
I relate to this cryptid a lot, so it really speaks to my soul.
It does feel like a very millennial cryptid.
For sure.
Definitely.
Our cryptid would just weep and weep.
Yep.
Wow, I can't believe I haven't. I love that cryptid.
Do you have a favorite cryptid?
Ooh. I mean, I think it's the squonk now. I think you've won me over. I don't have a favorite cryptid, and it's something that now feels like a source of shame that I'm feeling. I gotta think about it. You know, I do like the skunk ape. I think that's a fun one. I like pig people. I did a whole urban legends episode. We do an urban legends hotline thing where we have people call in and then we investigate urban legends. And one of them was these cannibal pig people that attacked people making out on this hill, which is just, I love a lover's lane type of situation. And they would go after them. And there's all kinds of weird. So, you know, a little darker, a little grittier cryptid for me, I guess.
So it's funny you should mention the pig people, because we also have folklore about that.
You got pig people?
Yeah, in Mystic, Connecticut, there is the Mystic Pigman, and its only sighting was supposedly attacking a woman by the river, and it also happened to coincide with another kind of story that was happening the same time in Vermont, I believe.
You got pig people. I don't know. They're everywhere.
Yeah,
apparently.
They're everywhere. So,
well, and I do love that too about cryptids, that there are different versions of very similar creatures in different parts of the country. And that's always, you know, there's always the question of does that happen through word of mouth and someone travels there, they hear about a cryptid, they bring it home, or is there some kind of like collective consciousness in which these same kind of creatures pop up in some kind of like Jungian archetype way, where there's something about them that we all relate to, and so we create them together at the same time. I don't know. I mean, do you have any thoughts about that, about why cryptids pop up in different places and then why some of them are so similar?
I definitely am a firm believer in the idea of the collective unconscious, in that we kind of have this wellspring of stories that we as humans draw from. And a good kind of example that I ran into was, we have a story from Connecticut about these creatures called the Makiawisug, and they come from Mohegan indigenous tradition. And I was vacationing in Mexico, and I took a tour to visit a cenote. And while I was on the tour, the guide said something, "Oh, do you see our shrine up on the hill there?" And I said, "No, what's the story with the shrine?" And they said, "Oh, well, it's the shrine for the little people, and we make sure that we leave them offerings, and we always ask them for permission before we ever do construction projects and things like that." And so I'm in the Riviera Maya, hundreds of miles from Connecticut, and this is essentially the same story as the Mohegans Makiawisug. They leave them offerings in baskets in the woods, and they have kind of rules of etiquette that they're supposed to follow, and they're supposed to be polite, not talk about them, not stare at them or point at them, things like that. And I just thought that was so interesting. You know, it was essentially these two cultures that most likely would have never encountered one another, and they have that sort of same story or same kind of archetype that they're relating. I just find that so interesting.
Yeah, there seems to be some human need for cryptids.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly what that is. Something, I mean, I do think it does draw people together in some kind of collective ritual, right? You're leaving something for this cryptid, or you're doing something to protect yourself from it, or you're even coming together to have Sponkapalooza. Am I getting that right?
Sponkapalooza.
Like, it's still a ritual in a way, you know, and I think that, I don't know, there is some kind of community aspect to the cryptid, and I love that. And I think that's really special.
Yeah, I love that too. And that's what I found even more since we've published the book and, you know, have been out talking about it. It's a great storytelling mechanism.
Yeah. People are always happy to share their stories too. You know, it's a really good way to bring people together.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. I want to thank you both. This was a lot of fun. I loved hearing this story, and I'm excited that you're out there collecting these cryptids, and I wonder if there will be a Connecticut Cryptids too.
Maybe an expanded version with some of the stories that we missed.
Yeah.
That's what we've sort of thought about as a maybe multi-year plan.
Yeah. I mean, if people want to get creative and start coming up with some more cryptids and getting them out there, like, we could make a part 2 happen, but we need some community help.
We do. Everybody get your hoaxing on, please.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having us. This was so much fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Pleasure's all mine. Thanks again, you guys. This was American Hysteria. You can find Pat and Val's book, Connecticut Cryptids, at ctcryptids.com or in the link in our episode notes. In case you haven't heard, on December 11th, American Hysteria will be at the Moore Theater in Seattle for a massive seance, the live theater show that we're putting on with You're Wrong About and The Little Lies, our producer Miranda's Fleetwood Mac tribute band. It's a totally wild, totally surprising show that you're not going to want to miss. Next month, we'll be in San Francisco on January 11th and in LA on January 24th. If you want to support our show and help us continue making it, you can head to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. You'll get ad-free episodes and bonus content like Hysteria Home Companion, the podcast that I do with our producer Miranda, where we tell you stories related to the topics that we cover and stories that we know that you'll love. That's patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. Remember that you can go to AmericanHysteria.com and leave us a message on our Urban Legends hotline about a story that you remember from growing up that you'd like us to look into. And at AmericanHysteria.com, you can also pick up some of our merch. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler, and our associate producer is Riley Swedelius Smith. And I'm your host, Chelsey Weber Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have a great week.